long way from Jersey to Madeira, it's not so far away that people don't know what's going on. All over Madeira, it's easy to find people who've spent time in the Channel Islands. For some, it was a happy experience, but others have bitter memories and once again tell stories of exploitation, low pay and poor housing. Since we've been here in Madeira, we've spoken to a lot of people who are prepared to talk to us privately about their problems when working in the Channel Islands. But still, they're not prepared to be identified on camera. The fear of losing their jobs, the fear of being victimised in some way, follows them across thousands of miles of sea back home to Madeira, and it's that fear that makes them vulnerable to exploitation. It's only since we've been here that we've begun to understand why they're prepared to put up with it. The mountainous terrain makes Madeira stunningly beautiful, but although the volcanic soil is fertile, there just isn't enough of it to generate the wealth to match the Madeirans' ambitions. This is what drives these hard-working people, building homes, and nice ones at that. Most of the money pouring into Canissal has come from the Channel Islands. The self-built houses take years to complete. Each visit to Britain is followed by a burst of construction until the cash runs out. They're prepared to leave their families and children for months, sometimes years at a time, to earn the money needed. If conditions are less than ideal in the Channel Islands, then that's far less important than the money they bring home. It's a priority that makes them vulnerable, and perhaps one of the worst examples of exploitation is in Guernsey. Guernsey is a wealthy island when compared with Madeira, and recent years have seen improvements to conditions for immigrant labour. Unlike Jersey, Guernsey has no code of practice, but the Department of Health has the power to alleviate unsatisfactory living conditions. However, they can't recall ever receiving a complaint from Portuguese workers. But that doesn't mean all is well. The Summerlands Hotel is one of a number set up to house female workers. Some of the women were so outraged at what they're charged to stay here that they were prepared to disobey house rules to allow us to film secretly. They wouldn't appear on camera. In this one room, 9 women have to share. Although they keep it clean and tidy, when full, the room is cramped in the extreme. All 9 women have to share this damp and inadequate bathroom. One can only guess at what it must be like in the rush hour. Their concern is that each of them is charged £38 a week to live here. At that rate, this one room would bring in almost £1,400 a month. It was a similar story in this room, where 8 women were sharing what was once the hotel's bar. When we filmed at Summerlands, we were told that 61 women were in residence, a potential income of £9,200 a month. This is one of 2 women who lived at Summerlands and who agreed to talk to us. She said she was sacked from her job because her employer thought she was saying rude things about him in Portuguese.
The accommodation had no conditions. There was no hot water, the beds were broken, the rooms took 3, 4, 5, 6 girls, not enough cookers, not enough pans in the kitchen. Summerland was a terrible place. The worst of it all was when you had to go for the bath and everybody had to queue. There used to be arguments about it because everybody wanted to get done.
The cooking arrangements for so many are pitiful. After a long day's work, the women sometimes had to wait hours for their turn with the pans. With each woman having to store her own food and jostle for a turn to cook it, the kitchen became a pressure cooker to raise tempers. But if they were unhappy with the arrangements at Summerlands, a contract committed them to work for a given period. Their contract of employment was signed by each woman at the Department of Immigration back in Madeira. It states that this year, basic pay was £120.70 a week, but almost a third of their wages was committed to lodgings, £38 per person. In most cases, this is the first contract they'd ever signed, and they were confused and perhaps a little naive.
The contract didn't specify that the £38 were going to be taken out of 120. And I thought the £120 were the net wages, and the other £38 was separate. I felt angry and I felt like going back to Madeira, but I couldn't. The boss said that I had signed the contract, I had to work with him, and I had no choice to choose for anything.
Estávamos pagando.
We weren't happy about it. We paid a lot for accommodation. The wages weren't that high. The accommodation wasn't good. And I would like to tell him that the way they treat the Portuguese girls is not fair. And we had the feeling that somebody was getting rich at our expense.
So who is that somebody who stands accused of exploitation? Well, he's president of the Guernsey Growers Association, and his company acts as an agent for farmers in Guernsey. It's this man, Rodney Brouard. It's Mr. Brouard who recruits on behalf of farmers, draws up workers' contracts and sends them off to Madeira. It's Mr. Brouard whose contracts state how much will be charged for accommodation. It's Mr. Brouard whose company, Stan Brouard Limited, owns Summerlands Hotel and 6 others like it, all full of women who have little choice than to live where he says and pay his rates. We repeatedly asked him to take part in this programme to put his point of view, but he refused. However, Close Up filmed him earlier this year on another topic.
Brouard is making a lot of money out of it. He's got 60 girls living in one house alone, paying so much money. Yes, of course he is making a lot out of it.
When Madeirans are recruited to work in Guernsey, it's the Department of Immigration that handles the contracts. But if the women don't realise what they're letting themselves in for, then neither do the Madeiran authorities.
We have been speaking with authorities about the accommodation. Accommodation was really a problem that was concerning us, because some girls, they were living, some years ago, they were living 6, 7, sometimes 8 girls in a room, and that we don't consider enough privacy, enough conditions.
Mr. Santos is talking about conditions 7 years ago, but he doesn't seem to be aware that it's still going on. The overcrowded rooms in Summerlands were filmed just a few months ago. In another of Rodney Brouard's hotels, the Passiflora, we couldn't see into all the rooms, but again there were signs of many women sharing. They too were sent here by the Director of Immigration, who denies knowledge of the situation.
We are not aware of those situations, because if we were aware of those situations, we will immediately make a complaint to the authorities in Guernsey.
But these are girls who have signed the contracts in this office, and you're saying that you're not aware of this problem.
They signed the contracts, they flew to work. Take an example for the enterprise Brouard, and when they get there, we really do not know if they are staying in a room of 5, 6, 7 persons. We don't know, because we're not with them permanently, you see.
But they don't know that either, and they are staying that many to a room.
They don't know it too. I don't know if they will know it too or not.
Gilberto Franco is the honorary Portuguese consul in Jersey. It's his job to look after the welfare of his people in the Channel Islands. He's been told about the overcrowding in Mr. Brouard's hotels, but even the representative of the Portuguese government wasn't allowed to see for himself.
When I went to Guernsey, the owner would not allow anyone to go into his property.
We managed to go in. Why can't you?
Well, he simply wouldn't let me go in.
Can you not go in at the invitation of the girls who are staying in the room?
Not really.
Although the Director of Immigration denies it, Gilberto Franco says the Madeiran authorities know all about Rodney Brouard and his hotels.
I have informed the authorities in Madeira not to let people go and work for that particular firm, because it is an agent that acts for several different owners, and in my opinion he is using his agency to provide enough numbers to go into the lodgings that belongs to him.
Elsewhere in Guernsey, unconnected with Rodney Brouard, workers on this farm during the summer months are accommodated in tents. They're almost completely hidden from public view, and very few people knew of their existence. One evening we went onto the farm to see the tents and talk to the women. We believe they were charged £17 a week to live under canvas, but they refused to show us a contract or to give any information. The women became very agitated, and as we tried to film, we were attacked. The camera was broken. Later, we learned the women had been told on no account should they let anyone see where they lived. A farm manager declined to comment. It is possible to obtain a short-term licence to house workers in tents, but once more all knowledge of this was denied in Madeira.
A lot of your people have told me that whenever you go over to the islands,
Yes.
you only see the good accommodation. I have seen girls, for example, who are living in tents. Have you seen girls living in tents?
No, I have not seen
Well,
girls.
why not?
I have not seen girls living in tents. As you will agree with me, when we go for an official visit, all the minutes are counted. People should come to us and say what's going on. People should come to us, or should come to the local authorities in Channel Islands, to the Portuguese consul, or whatever, and tell them exactly their conditions of living. If you see people living in a tent, I am so sorry for that these people didn't tell us that.
A politician from Madeira has got no right to go into anybody's farm to inspect their premises. And it's very awkward when you are invited to see a few, but you're not able to choose which one to go.
Doesn't that leave a danger of only seeing the good accommodation?
Of course.
I am less than impressed with the representation they have in the island, and indeed the representation they have from their own authorities in Madeira. I think what happens is when people visit one community to the other, the various authorities and so on, various politicians, to see how the exchange of labour is going and so on, they get wined and dined and driven around in fancy cars and so on, and they don't actually get down to grassroots, to see what the working conditions are like, and to actually speak about the nitty-gritty of this problem. And I think that's a real failing of the situation, and I think an awful lot could be done for the Madeiran and Portuguese workforce in the island if their own representation was somewhat stronger and somewhat less afraid to speak out on their behalf.
In contrast to the cramped hotels, tin huts and tents, and in spite of the recession, there are employers who are finding a way to provide good accommodation and to provide it free of charge. On this Jersey farm, temporary buildings are providing the ideal solution. Inside, though not exactly spacious, immigrant workers can live in a warm, comfortable environment. A charge is made for electricity, but not for the accommodation itself. In some circumstances, financial assistance is available to tenant farmers to put in portable accommodation. There are employers who've gone to even greater lengths to look after their staff. This accommodation block cost more than £130,000 to build. There are 8 double rooms with ensuite bathrooms and kitchen. The people who live here do so for up to 11 months of the year, once more free of charge.
We really took it out of the business. It's been difficult to finance it, but there is a permanent fixture.
Why do you think it's worth investing that amount of money in your staff?
I think it's probably worth investing in my staff because they're here for a long period of time. They need decent accommodation, and they are very good staff. They are the linchpin of my business.
Madeira has a rosy future. EEC money is pouring into the island by the million. There are major construction works to improve the road network, and they plan to boost their tourism industry. All this adds up to many more jobs for the locals. But what's good news for them is bad news for the Channel Islands. The next generation of workers will be less inclined to work anywhere with low pay and poor conditions. And there's a polite but veiled warning to Channel Island employers from a senior politician.
It's true that big investments are being done in Madeira, and so it's the possibility to stay here and to live here are going better and better. Of course, that for Jersey, for Guernsey, it's important to have the Madeirians there. I think that they have to maintain or to improve the conditions if for the Madeirians to stay there, because now they have more and more opportunities to stay here.
It is absolutely crucial that we have a willing, enthusiastic and skilled workforce prepared to come to the island and serve us in those two industries. And we are going to have to improve the terms and conditions of employment if we are going to continue to attract the sort of workforce that we need to enable us to continue to compete with the rest of the EC.
Well, I always point out whenever there are negotiations about wages, that they bear that in mind. If they pay peanuts, they will get monkeys, and that concerns me.
So where will the planes carrying the next generation of Madeiran workers be destined? It could be South America, South Africa or continental Europe. In the first 6 months of this year, numbers of Madeirans leaving for the Channel Islands were down by 10%. By midsummer, there were only 4,000 Portuguese workers in Jersey. That's a reduction of 20% on last summer. In the past, these hard-working people have helped create much wealth. But in the future, if the planes are to land on the runways of Jersey and Guernsey, employers know what they must do.